The long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is another way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that should be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything. And there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future that is not our own. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Secretary General is directed to call the roll of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla,
Senator Revilla present.
Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar, Mark, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Zubiri, the Senate President.
With 21 senators physically present and 1 senator virtually present for a total of 22 senators, Chair hereby declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, before we proceed with the reference of business, Mr. President, since this involves a matter of constitutional significance, Mr. President, and with the consent of the body, and pursuant to Section 18, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution, I move to elect Senator Miguel Mig Zubiri, our statesman, as a member of the Commission on Appointments. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, same is approved. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is
President,
there?
if I may, Mr. President, if I may I be recognized? Mr. President?
Senator Villanueva is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. With the indulgence of our Majority Leader and our distinguished colleagues, Mr. President, in today's agenda, the order of business for today's session includes the referral of bills and resolutions to the different committees that exercises jurisdiction of all these bills and measures, Mr. President, as recognized by our rules in Rule 10, Section 13 of our rules. Yun po yung primary consideration in determining the referral. May I remind the body, Mr. President, that the leadership of various committees are currently vacant in view of yesterday's resignations. In fact, there are at least 5, 6 committees na wala pong chairmanship. And I would just like again to remind the body, and I'm not raising a point of order, Mr. President, just to be clarified, in Rule 18, Section 50 of our rules, it provides here, Mr. President, that the matters mentioned dun po sa order of business which have to be acted upon by the Senate shall be referred to the proper committee. Nakalagay po dyan, and I quote, which have to be acted upon. Mr. President, how can the body act on these particular measures in light of these vacancies? I just want to be clarified, Mr. President.
I assure the good gentleman from Bulacan that we will be able to fully organize the Senate by tomorrow. As he very well knows, it usually takes the Senate 1 to 2 weeks to organize the Senate after a new Congress is elected. In fact, we are only given 2 days, especially given the resignation of the chairpersons of those committees, sans those that we replaced yesterday. We did not expect and we were not aware of those resignations, so we would have thought that that would have continued until their replacements would have been elected by the body. But given the resignations yesterday, which we fully understand and accept, and the body accepted, we will try to do the job within today or tomorrow before we adjourn, so that the committees can conduct hearings during the recess.
I understand, Mr. President, and I appreciate the explanation being given to this representation by our newly elected Senate President. May I just know, Mr. President, if we are not violating Section 18 of our Rule 18, Section 50 of our rules, because as I was talking, Mr. President, with our colleagues here, Senator Amy, Marcos, we were discussing, Mr. President, as to the election of not just members of the committees, but also those who resigned, Mr. President, including this representation, opted to join the minority, for instance, then the ratio of representation in the different committees will also change, Mr. President. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Definitely, Your Honor, which is why, again, the memberships in the committees would be a moving target depending on the affiliation to be decided upon by the members of the Senate.
And so, Mr. President, despite the fact that there are no committee chairmanships, no official membership in the committees, we can proceed. Is that the ruling of the chair? We can proceed with the
To
reference of
refer?
business. To refer.
Yes, yes, Your Honor, we can. For the simple reason that even if we refer them today, a hearing needs to be, notice should be given before hearing can be conducted. If we can reorganize by tomorrow, then it would not have caused even a single day's delay.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Your Honor. And if we do not do that now, Your Honor, pag wala po tayong session, hindi tayo makaka-refer sa mga komite, mas malaking sayang na oras. So habang may plenary session, ma-refer po natin sa mga komite, mga nakabinbin na.
And that's exactly my point, Mr. President. That I perhaps wanted to emphasize even more what the Rule 18, Section 50 says, which have to be acted upon by the Senate. And that's why I understand, Mr. President, if we can fast track the pagbuo, Mr. President, ng ating mga committee. And considering also, Mr. President, we have to talk about the membership, which is quite a daunting task, Mr. President. Thank you.
Again, for the record, new senates are given at least 2 weeks by tradition and practice to organize. We've only had a day, so I hope you will understand our situation, Your Honor. And we thank the gentleman
Yes, Mr.
for his
President.
reminder
Thank
and
you.
input.
Thank you. Just a reminder. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank
President,
you, Senator Villanueva. Majority leaders recognized.
Mr. President, I reiterate the previous motion to proceed with the reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 2675, an act requiring the disclosure of nutritional information in menus of food service establishments by Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship.
2676, requiring all public telecommunication entities granted with congressional franchises to provide their subscribers with free access to government websites. Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Public Services.
2677, institutionalizing a grant and fee program to incentivize and promote the proper recycling of used computers and the development of a national infrastructure for the recycling of used computers. Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change.
2678, amending certain sections of RA 2382 as amended, otherwise known as the Medical Act of 1959, and for other purposes. Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Organization, Professional Regulation, Health, Demography and Finance.
2679, allowing foreign nationals to take local licensure examinations for certification purposes, amending for the purpose RA 8981. Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation.
2680, providing for rules on plea bargaining agreement in criminal cases, providing penalties in violation therefore and for other purposes. Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
2681, promoting entrepreneurship and livelihood for sustainable development, amending RA 11310, institutionalizing the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program for Peace. Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship and Finance.
2682, establishing a College of Medicine at the Sultan Kudarat State University, province of Sultan Kudarat, to be known as the Sultan Kudarat State University College of Medicine, appropriating funds therefore.
To the
Senator
Committees
Zubiri.
on Higher Technical Vocational Education, Ways and Means and Finance.
2683, upgrading the Bukidnon Provincial Hospital, the Municipality of Maramag, Bukidnon, into a tertiary level 3 general hospital to be known as the BPH Maramag, under the control and supervision and management of the DOH, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Zubiri.
Session is suspended. There is a previous motion to refer the aforestated measure to the Committee on Rules. Rather, there is a motion to refer the aforestated measure. The same is referred to the Committee on Rules.
Senate number 2684, enhancing Philippine tax incentives policy administration, amending for the purpose section 27, 28, 32, 106, 108, 109, 112, 292, 293, 294, 295, 296, 297, 300, 301, 309, and 311. And adding new sections 295A and 296A in the NIRC of 1997 as amended for other purposes. Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
2685, converting the Quezon Medical Center in the city of Lucena, province of Quezon, into a tertiary level hospital and regional training center, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Ejercito.
To the Committee on Rules.
Resolutions. Proposed Senate Resolution 1024, directing the Committee on Public Information and Mass Media to conduct an inquiry on the surging cost of rice in the market, thereby reinforcing the public's awareness of the actions being undertaken by the government to ensure food security. Senator Padilla.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, and Public Information and Mass Media.
1025, directing the Senate Committee on Public Information and Mass Media to conduct an inquiry on the information dissemination campaign of the government on its programs and policies response to virus and environmental shocks with an end view of adopting a whole of society approach. Senator Padilla.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources, Climate Change, Public Information and Mass Media.
1026, directing the Senate Committee on Public Information and Mass Media to conduct an inquiry on the conduct of the 39th United States-Philippines Balikatan exercise with the end view of informing the public of its success, gains, prospects, and opportunities. Senator Padilla.
To the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification and Reconciliation, and Public Information and Mass Media.
1027, directing the Committee on Cultural Communities and Muslim Affairs to conduct an inquiry on the plight of indigenous peoples and indigenous cultural communities affected by the El Nino Southern Oscillation in the country, with the end view of ensuring that government intervention and programs benefiting our IPs, ICCs are implemented. Senator Padilla.
To the Committees on Cultural Communities and Muslim Affairs, Environment, Natural Resources, and Climate Change.
1028, directing the Senate Committee on Public Information and Mass Media to conduct an inquiry on the failure of government to effectively communicate policies and relevant implementing details of laws that are targeted to support our local farmers and cushion the effects of RA 11203. Senator Padilla.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, and Public Information and Mass Media. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, our tradition would require the acknowledgement of guests. Inside this plenary, while they are not physically present in the seats given to them, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our mayors from Pangasinan, Orbestondo, Aguilar, and mga Tarem, as well as the mayors of Midsayap, North Cotabato, and the mayor of Litagtag, Batangas, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2593. This is the bill on the new Government Procurement Act. I so move, Mr. President.
There is a motion. Hearing none. Same is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the bill is that we are in the period of individual amendments. And with the consent of the body, I move to resume the period of individual amendments using the amended copy of the bill as of May 15, 2024 as our working draft, and to recognize the sponsor of the measure, the Honorable Sani Angara, for individual amendments, Mr. President.
The Honorable Sani Angara, with due thanks from the chair, is recognized for finishing up his baby that he started and had painstakingly long hours to craft, develop, and perfect to this stage. You are recognized, sir.
I think
Yes,
the
Mr. President, just one point of,
the-
I am not trying to elicit clarification, but more of education from our good Senate President who trained all of us in the House of Representatives. Mr. President, because our rules under Section 25, Rule 25, Section 71, letter B, states that the chairperson of the committee shall sponsor the bill or any member designated by the committee. I just want, just for my education, Mr. President, when Senator Angara resigned as committee chair of the Senate Committee on Finance, so what is now the basis of this initiative, Mr. President? But we are all aware, Mr. President, that Senator Angara works hard, and I'm not trying to diminish his contribution in passing this measure. And I know, and I'm supportive of this measure. I just wanted to put on record, Mr. President, that I'm not sure if the body already designated him, Mr. President, as our some sort of being a caretaker of the bill, Mr. President. And again, I don't question the personality and the competence of our very able former finance chairman, Mr. President. Thank you.
Your Honor, yesterday, to be candid about it, yesterday after Senator Angara made manifest on the floor his intention to resign and actually resigned, we talked in open session. And I asked him if it would be possible for him to still sponsor the measure. In spite and despite the fact that formally, as he stated, there was no committee on finance meeting to so designated, the consideration of the chair is that when the majority leader moved for his recognition to sponsor the measure and read the amendments, no objection being interposed, an inquiry though was posed, then I presume the plenary authorized him, which is more superior to the committee. I hope that satisfies the gentleman.
I think he's
from
objecting,
Bulacan.
Mr. President. I think he's objecting.
To you?
No, I'm not.
I think he's objecting, Mr. President.
I'm not, Mr. President. I'm not, Mr. President. In fact, Mr. President, just to be frank about this, Mr. President, is that we just wanted to make sure that the rules being followed, and I know that the new majority leader is very keen on this. Our Senate President is very much aware of what we are doing. And so with the consent of the body and the majority leader made a motion, there is no need for us to somehow suspend the rules and proceed by electing or designating Senator Angara as the sponsor, chairman, defending the said measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for
Thank you
your
for educating me
manifestation.
again, Mr. President. You have been a great help in continuously educating this representation, especially in the rules of procedures.
Thank you for the manifestation and inputs of the gentleman from Bulacan, Senator Villanueva. The points are well taken, and we also learn from you, Your Honor, because you are one of the best and longest-serving majority leaders here of mine in the Senate dahil nagbabago-bago ng panahon ko.
And Mr. President, if
Majority
I may
Leader?
add to the conversation, Mr. President, the resignation of the sponsor here does not divest him of his right to continue with his sponsorship of his own bill. It would now be attached to his being a sponsor to proceed with this bill, Mr. President. That's the opinion of this
lesson of being
uh, of this representation, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Noted.
if I may, Mr. President, I have a different opinion, Mr. President. Under Rule 25, Section 71, letter B of our rules, Mr. President, it is the chairperson of the committee who shall sponsor the bill or any member designated by the committee. We have yet to decide, Mr. President, we have yet to elect the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Finance. We have yet to convene the members of the Committee on Finance. And so, Mr. President, and that's the main reason why I stand here today, because if there is a need to suspend our rules, I am going to support it, Mr. President. Now, if there is no need, because the majority leader made mention that with the consent of the body, and I am moving for it, and no one objects, I will adhere and submit to the wisdom of the majority. Thank you, Mr. President.
That was already the ruling of the chair, clarifying the inquiry of the good gentleman from Bulacan, and the remarks of the majority leader are duly noted. May I now recognize Senator Angara. We are now in the period of amendments, and the good gentleman is recognized to propose amendments.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Majority Leader, dear colleagues, and we are in receipt of amendments from Senators Legarda, Villanueva, Pimentel, Ontiveros, Binay, De La Rosa, Marcos, and Pia Cayetano. And with their permission, with the body's permission, I'd like to take them one by one. First, Mr. President, on page 1, section 2, the declaration of policy. This is from Senator Pimentel. On page 1, line 8, after the word professionalization, to delete the word and on the same page and line after the word sustainability, to insert the phrase and value for money. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 3, section 4, this is scope and application, also from Senator Pimentel. Page 3, line 2, to delete the phrase provided that foreign assisted projects under a treaty or international or executive agreement that expressly provides for different procurement rules or procedures other than the provisions of this act shall be observed, and to replace it with the phrase any treaty or international or executive agreement affecting the subject matter of this act to which the Philippine government is a signatory shall be observed. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you. Page 3, section 5, Mr. President, on the definition of terms, page 3, line 13, before the word SUCs to insert the phrase RA 8292 in case of, and still on page 3 between lines 13 to 14, to delete the word respective, and after the word sanggunian, insert the phrase through an appropriations ordinance. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you. Page 4, section 5, definition of terms, also from Senator Pimentel. Page 4, between lines 16 and 17, to insert a new item, which shall read as follows, open close parenthesis, financial eligibility, refers to having the financial capacity resources to manufacture, distribute, or deliver the goods, infrastructure projects, and consulting services being procured. So moved.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 5, section 5, definition of terms, between lines 17 and 18, also from Senator Pimentel, to insert a new item to read as follows. Open close parenthesis, legal eligibility refers to having the legal capacity to act as an entity as evidenced by permits, licenses, and or registrations required by law to engage in the business of manufacturing, distributing, or delivering the goods, infrastructure projects, and consulting services being procured. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you. Page 6, section 5, letter U, on the definition of terms. This is line 13, to delete the word estate and replace it with the word property. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 6, section 5, also on the definition of terms from Senator Pimentel, after line 20, to insert new subsections to be read as follows. Open close parenthesis, technical eligibility refers to having the experience or expertise to undertake the services, manufacture, distribute, or deliver the goods, infrastructure projects, and consulting services being procured. Open close parenthesis, value for money takes into account the optimum combination of quality and cost to meet the end user's requirements and objectives. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you. Page 6, section 6, this is the standardization of procurement processes and forms from Senator Risa Hontiveros on page 6, after line 30, to insert a new sentence as follows. In addition, The GPPB shall develop a decision tree which to be included in the IRR that shall guide procuring entities on which mode of procurement is the most fit for their desired purpose. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 7, Section 7 on strategic procurement planning and budgeting linkage. The second paragraph, this is from Senator Legarda. Line 10 on page 7, between the words project and to insert the phrase including its environmental impact. And also on the same page, line 14, between the words responsible and consumption to insert the phrase and sustainable. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 7, Section 7, still on strategic procurement planning and budgeting linkage from Senator Pia Cayetano. Line 15 of page 7, after the phrase but not limited to insert the phrase rehabilitation of properties. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Page 7, Section 7 on strategic, again, procurement planning from Senator Risa. On line 20, page 7, insert a new paragraph for subcontracting arrangements. The following rules shall apply to locally funded projects and to projects financed through official development assistance, except those covered by treaty provisions. 1, the HOPE must provide prior approval to subcontracting. 2, subcontractors must meet eligibility criteria. 3, the bidder or general contractor must disclose subcontractors during the bidding process. 4, the general contractor shall remain liable for the subcontractor's actions, faults, defaults, delays, and negligence. 5, the general contractor and the subcontractor shall share liability in cases where safety standards or other labor standards are violated. And 6, the value of the entire completed and accepted project, including the subcontracted portion, shall be recorded as experience of the general contractor. In particular, A, the subcontractor shall get credit for 100% of the value of the subcontracted portion of the project. B, subcontractors shall be eligible to concessional windows of GFIs that treat receivables from the government as loan security. The receivables of subcontractors due from their general contractor shall similarly be accepted as loan security by GFIs. C, contract performance monitoring, such as but not limited to the Constructor's Performance Evaluation System, CPES, shall also be mandatorily applied to the work of subcontractors. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
On page 7, Mr. President, between lines 20 and 21, to insert a new paragraph which reads, to guarantee the usefulness throughout the whole life cycle of goods to be procured, the procuring entity shall ensure that goods to be procured are brand new, provided that the procurement of second-hand, refurbished, or reconditioned goods, such as military, defense, or law enforcement equipment or materiel, may be considered to secure a contract that is most advantageous to the government, subject to the guidelines to be issued by the DBM and subject to compliance with relevant criteria such as durability, remaining useful life, sustainability, maintenance cost, and warranty. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, sir. Page 7, Section 7 from Senator Risa Ontiveros on line 24 to replace the phrase to be specified in the IRR with the following, which shall at least include the following. A, name of the project procurement. B, project management office / end user unit. C, general description of the project / procurement. D, procurement methods to be adopted and indicating if the procurement tasks are to be outsourced. E, criteria for bid evaluation. F, time schedule. G, source of funds. And H, approved budget for the contract. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Next is page 8, line 2, Mr. President. Before the word have, this is from Senator Legarda and Senator Pia. Before the word have, to insert the phrase, which shall consider, among others, the impact on the environment. And on the page, the same page 8, between lines 5 and 6, to insert a new paragraph, procuring entities may consider architectural design that is well curated and aesthetic to ensure that the infrastructure project not only meets functional requirements, but also contributes to its overall appeal and architectural integrity. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 8, Section 9 on multi-year contracting from Senator Legarda. This is line 6, page 8. Remove the words constitutional offices and replace it with the word including. And on the same page, line 7, to remove the words projects or activities and replace it with the words activities and projects. And on the same page, on line 8, remove the phrase entering into contracts and replace it with the phrase the commencement of any procurement activity. And lastly, still on line 8, to delete the phrase covering the full contract cost, and on line 9, delete the phrase the procurement of. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Uh, on page 8, line 9, after the word projects, to insert the phrase provided that for multi-year projects to be funded from internally generated income of the SUC shall secure the prior authority from its board before starting any procurement activities covering the full contract cost. And still on the same page, second paragraph of section 9 on line 10, to delete the word and after the word GFIs, insert the words and SUCs. And on line 11, removing the phrase entering into contracts, replacing it with the phrase commencing any procurement activities. And on line 12, to remove the phrase and proceeding with their procurement and to replace it with the phrase covering the full contract cost. And finally, on line 14, to delete the words provided that. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, sir. Page 9, section 11, line 5, Mr. President, to insert the word supplier before the word warranty. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 9, lines 9 to 10, on early procurement activities, to delete the phrase in order to ensure the timely implementation of projects and replace it with the phrase for goods to be delivered, infrastructure projects to be implemented, and consulting services to be rendered in the following fiscal year. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Mr. President, thank you. On line 18, to delete the word execution and replace it with the word possession. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 9, section 13 from Senator Pia Cayetano, line 24, to delete the words as may be applicable and replace it with the phrase provided that the GPPB shall issue appropriate guidelines on the application of LCCA. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. If we may now go to page 10, section 15, the engagement of a procurement agent. On page 10, line 2, after the words delegate the, to insert the phrase issuance of award and the. And on page 10, line 11, after the word procurement, insert a new item C, which shall read, the procurement agent should be another government agency expert in the field which is the subject of procurement. This shall be expressly provided in the memorandum of agreement with the procuring entity, and to renumber the succeeding items accordingly. That's from Senator Ontiveros. And then last, also on line 19, same section, Mr. President, after the words procurement agent, insert the words providing the, and after the word details, insert the word of, and lastly on line 24, to delete the words General Appropriations Act and replace it with Appropriations Law. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 11, this is a new section on pooled procurement to read as follows. On page 11, after line 7, pooled procurement, procuring entities shall consider the advantages of a pooled procurement mechanism as a procurement strategy by collaborating or consolidating their requirements in a single joint bulk or group procurement in order to achieve greater value for money and procurement efficiency through demand aggregation, improve quality standards by combining technical capacity, and increase availability and secure sustainability of supplies. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Move that we renumber the sections accordingly also, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. On page 11, this is a section on renewal of regular and recurring services. So this is on page 11, right after the new section 17 we just read on pooled procurement, to insert a new section 18 to read as follows. Section 18, renewal of regular and recurring services. The procuring entity may consider undertaking renewal of regular and recurring services to facilitate the immediate implementation of procurement projects. The duration for each renewal contract shall not exceed 1 year. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, sir. On page 11, section 17, this is from Senator Risa. Line 10 of page 11, to replace the word items with goods. And on the same page, between lines 13 and 14, insert a new paragraph to read as follows. The procuring entity, whenever applicable, shall develop guidelines for its warehousing functions, ensuring auditable systems that promote integrity and efficiency, and shall establish a compliance framework mandating training, audits, and transparent recording. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Mr. President, next is also from Senator Risa. This is page 11, section 18, procurement by electronic means. On line 26, after the word payment, to insert a new sentence, The PhilJEP shall develop features that make pertinent information accessible and transparent at all stages of procurement, except procurements involving and affecting national security. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 12, section 18, procurement by electronic means, line 3, after the word bidding, to insert a new sentence to read as follows: electronic signatures used for this purpose must comply with the standards set in Republic Act number 8792 or the E-Commerce Act. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
On page 12, line 12, after the word consultants, to insert the phrase and service providers. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, sir. Page 12, section 21, line 31, to delete the word association and replace it with the word assessment. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
On page 14, between lines 19 to 20, to insert a new paragraph which shall read as follows: the specific terms and conditions for the application of each mode of procurement shall be specified in the IRR. So move. This is from Senator Coco Pimentel, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Page 15, section 25, line 1 of page 15, to delete the sentence, the specific requirements and mechanics of which shall be defined in the IRR. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
On page 15, after line 16, insert a new subsection C that shall read as follows: procurement of highly specialized infrastructure projects involving and affecting national security. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Page 16, section 28, unsolicited offer with bid matching, on line 13, to delete the sentence, the procedure for bid matching shall be provided in the IRR. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, sir. On page 16, line 24, after the word contracting, to delete the phrase or single source procurement. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
From Senator Pimentel, Mr. President, page 17, line 11, after the word wherein, delete the phrase when provided for in the APP. And on the same page, line 14, after the word awarded, delete the phrase through competitive bidding. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 18, section 33E, line 16, after the words infrastructure project, insert the phrase or consulting service. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
On page 18, line 27, Mr. President, delete the phrase purchases of goods and replace it with procurement of goods, infrastructure projects, and consulting services. And on page 18, line 28, after the word government, insert the phrase which has the mandate Instructions number 755, EO 359, series of 1989, and Administrative Order number 17, series of 2011. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, sir. Page 19, section 33, F and I, and F double I. This is line 5 of page 19. After the word services, to delete the phrase of an artist, and after the word for, insert the phrase creative design or. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
On page 19, after line 6, to insert a new subsection double I to read as follows: restorative works for the conservation of historical and culturally significant structures, from Senator Cayetana. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next is from Senator De La Rosa. On page 20, line 15, after the word agencies, to insert the phrase or law enforcement agencies. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Mr. President, thank you. On page 20, lines 28 and 29, after the period, this is from Senator Pimentel, to delete the phrase lease of real property and venue for official use, which shall be in accordance with the IRR, and replace it with the following paragraph. For lease of real property and venue for official use, it is preferred that government agencies lease publicly owned real property or venue from other government agencies. If there is an available publicly owned real property or venue that complies with the requirements of the procuring entity, it may enter into a contract of lease with the government agency owner. In the event that the procuring entity would resort to privately owned real property or venue, the end user unit shall justify that the same is more efficient and economical to the government. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 21, line 2, to delete the phrase subject to the guidelines as provided for in the IRR, as well as on line 6 to 7, delete the phrase subject to the guidelines as provided for in the IRR. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 21, line 30, after the words entity, to insert a new item, section or subsection 4, which shall read as follows.
Okay na, sir.
Goods for critical public health priorities as determined by the DOH. From Senator Risa. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next, we move to page 21, line 31, after the word products, to insert the phrase electronic charging devices. And on page 22, line 1, after the word products, insert the phrase electronic charging devices. On the same page, line 1, after the word subscriptions, insert the phrase not available in the PSDBM. And on the same page, line 5, after the sub-item I, delete the phrase airline tickets and replace it with computer software and applications such as video conferencing applications, computer-aided design and drafting applications, office productivity tools, and system protection software. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 22, line 9, after the word GPPB, delete the phrase through the IRR. So moved.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. From Senator Pimentel on page 22, line 21, after GPPB, to insert the phrase which justifies the addition of a new type of negotiated procurement that will address the concerns of one or more government agencies. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next is page 22, line 27. After the word through, to delete the word competitive. And on page 23, line 12, after the word shall, delete the word share and replace it with provide a copy of. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 23, line 22, subsection B, after the word goods, delete the phrase that are the product and insert the phrase which include products. And on page 23, same page, line 29, before the word the, insert the phrase unless otherwise indicated in a written agreement. And on page 24, line 1, after the word supplier, delete the phrase without the written consent of the procuring entity. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, sir. On page 24, section 35, line 4, before the word relevant, insert the paragraph subject to style. The GPPB, in coordination with the National Innovation Council, NIC, shall develop procurement policies encompassing the entire research, innovation, and enterprise ecosystem to foster innovation. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the next amendment is from Senator Risa Ontiveros on page 24, lines 15 to 16. After the phrase goods costing above, delete the phrase and the figures 20 million pesos and replace it with 10 million pesos. And on the same page, lines 16 to 17, after the phrase infrastructure projects costing above, delete the phrase and the figures 50 million pesos and replace it with 20 million pesos. And on the same page, thank you. On the same page, lines 17 to 18, after the phrase consulting services costing above, delete the phrase and the figures 10 million pesos and replace it with 5 million pesos. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 25, section 38, lines 22 to 24 from Senator Coco Pimentel, to delete the last sentence and replace it with the PhilJEP's electronic marketplace may be used as a consignment platform for goods and equipment. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to our colleagues for their patience. There's still quite a few. On page 25, line 25, after the term PSDBM, to insert the phrase which is tasked with the centralized procurement of CSEs for the government in accordance with Letter of Instruction number 755, EO number 359, series of 1989, and an Administrative Order number 17, series of 2011. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next is page 26, section 39, line 15. Before the word removal, delete the word or, and on the same page, line 15, after the word removal, insert the phrase or death. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 26, line 23, this is on the functions of the back, also largely from Senator Coco Pimentel. Page 26, line 23, to insert a new subsection A, to read as follows: recommend to the Hope in the use of any of the modes of procurement as provided in Article 4 of this Act. And on page 26, the same page, line 28, after the word proceedings, delete the word and. Still on the same page, line 30, after the word representative, insert the phrase, provided that in the event the Hope shall disapprove such recommendation, such disapproval shall be based only on valid, reasonable, and justifiable grounds to be expressed in writing, copy furnished the back. And still, lastly, on page 26, line 30, to insert new subsections I, J, and K to read as follows. I recommend the imposition of sanctions in accordance with Article XX. J, prepare a procurement monitoring report that shall be approved and submitted by the Hope to the GPPB on a semestral basis. The contents and coverage of this report shall be provided in the IRR. And K, perform such other related functions as may be necessary, including the creation of a TWG from a pool of technical, financial, and/or legal experts to assist in the procurement process. The Hope shall be informed of the creation of a TWG and to delete lines 31 to 32 of page 26 and lines 1 to 9 of page 27. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next is page 28, line 9 from Senator Coco. After the word funds, but before the period, insert a comma and the phrase which may be sourced from fees collected by the BAC in relation to its procurement activities, and also on page 28, line 10, after the word purpose, but before the period, to insert the phrase and may determine other sources of funds to implement the grant of honoraria. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next is page 28, line 15, after the word procurement, to insert the word practitioner. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 30, line 25, after the word shall, to insert the word finally. And on the same page, line 26, after the word MIRB, insert a new paragraph to read as follows. The GPPB is authorized to adopt other award criterion, such as but not limited to the most advantageous responsive bid in the procurement of goods and infrastructure projects consistent with the fit-for-purpose procurement approach. The specific terms and conditions of such award criterion shall be specified in the guidelines to be issued by the GPPB. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 31, section 48, line 3, after the word bid, to delete the phrase for contracts under competitive bidding. On page 31, line 25, subsection D, delete the word criteria and replace it with the word criterion. On page 31, line 31, subsection F, delete the words approved budget for the contract and replace it with ABC. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next is page 32, line 10. After the word held, delete the word within and replace it with the phrase at least. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, sir. On page 34, line 9, after the word bids, this is from Senator Coco and Senator Joel Villanueva. On page 34, line 9, after the word bids, insert the phrase under modes of procurement to be determined in the IRR. And on the same page, line 11, after the word with, insert the word the. On the same page, line 13, delete the period, replace it with a colon, followed by the proviso, provided that sectors enumerated under this section on registration of certain sectors of this act may be allowed to post such other forms such as bid, securing, declaration. And so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 35, line 14, after the word merit, insert the phrase including technical competence and a credible track record. And on the same page, line 15, between the words functional and characteristics, insert the phrase design and. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 37, line 19, after the word bidding, insert the phrase in competitive bidding, limited source bidding, or competitive dialogue. And on the same page, between lines 20 and 21, to add a new subsection as follows. All bidders are declared ineligible. And to renumber the sections accordingly. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
On page 38, section 64, notice and execution of award, line 23. After the word from, insert the phrase the receipt of the notice of and delete the phrase of the contract. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
On page 39, section 65, to delete the entire paragraph in line 17 to 20, beginning with the words if no action up to the end. So move, Your Honor.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 39 from Senator Joel, line 25, delete the period and replace it with a colon, followed by this proviso. Provided that sectors enumerated under the section on registration of certain sectors of this act may be allowed to post other forms such as performance securing declaration. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 41 from Senators Legarda and Cayetano is on line 16 of page 41. After the word integrate, insert the phrase and implement. On the same page, line 17, after the word design, insert the phrase and specifications. Finally, after line 25, to insert another paragraph which reads, the GPPB shall ensure the incorporation and implementation of the concepts of sustainability and green public procurement in the activities of the government. The green public procurement strategy shall be implemented in phases, taking into account the readiness of both the government agencies as well as green product suppliers. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 42, line 3, after the period, to insert the sentence, this program shall likewise be considered by the procuring entity when an appropriation law earmarks an amount for projects specifically contracted out to any of these sectors. And on the same page, line 10, to delete the word debarment and replace it with the word blacklisting. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Mr. President, thank you. On page 43, line 3, after the comma, to insert the phrase Commission on Higher Education. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 43, line 6, delete the entire section on procurement of second-hand goods. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 44, section 79, from Senator Pimentel, lines 7 and 8, delete the phrase subject to the guideline which shall be provided for in the IRR of this act, and to replace it with the phrase also subject to government procurement using the most applicable mode of procurement. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 44, line 15, after the word any, insert the phrase partner, member of the board, or officer of the juridical entity. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 45, section 81, from Senator Pimentel, lines 3 and 4, to delete the last sentence and to replace with the phrase, the GPPB shall maintain an online registry of beneficial ownership information of bidders established for government procurement, which shall be accessible to the public. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Mr. President, next is page 45, lines 8 and 9. Nancy, akin ba yan? Sorry, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
And forbearance, Mr. President.
You're more than halfway through. Your Honor.
Thankfully, we're a little past the halfway mark, Mr. President.
More than halfway through.
Next section tayo, 45. Tapos ko na ba ito?
45.
Declaration of beneficial. Tapos na yan, no? Page 45, section 82, lines 8 and 9, to delete the phrase by filing a verified paper and paying for a non-refundable protest fee, and replace it with the following: for this purpose, the GPPB shall establish an electronic filing system for bidders to submit their protests after paying a non-refundable protest fee via electronic payment channels within the system. On the same page, line 9, between the words fee and insert the phrase which shall be a reasonable amount in proportion to the ABC but not to exceed 5 million pesos. Also on the same page, line 11, after the word IRR, delete the period and replace it with a colon followed by the proviso, provided, however, that a prior request for reconsideration should have been filed by the party concerned to the back, and the same has been resolved. And on the same page, between lines 11 and 12, to insert a new paragraph, the head of the procuring entity shall resolve the filed protest and issue a decision through the system. If a bidder chooses to appeal the decision, it can do so before the Government Procurement Adjudication Tribunal, utilizing the same filing system. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 45, delete lines 19 to 22 and replace it with the following paragraphs. The regional trial court shall have jurisdiction over final and executory decisions of the Hope. Court action shall be governed by Rule 65 of the 2019 amendments to the 1997 Rules of Civil Procedure. And in cases where the amounts are in excess of the specified thresholds, the decisions of the Hope shall become final and executory 10 days after receipt of a copy thereof by the parties, unless within the same period an appeal to the Government Procurement Adjudication Tribunal has been perfected. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 45, section 85, line 32 from Senators Risa, Senator Coco as well. Nothing to insert the following new paragraphs. Nothing in this act shall be interpreted to prejudice or prohibit the office of the Ombudsman from exercising its duties, functions, and powers as provided under the 1987 Constitution, Republic Act number 6770, otherwise known as the Ombudsman Act of 1989, and or any relevant rules and regulations pursuant thereto. The decisions of the GPAT shall be published in its website and must be accessible to the public. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 46, section 86, on line 12, delete the word private. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 46, section 87, from Senator Pimentel, in line 25, between the words that and disputes to insert the phrase or the word construction, and still on the same page, line 25, between the words competence and of, insert the phrase and jurisdiction. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
On page 48, line 5, after the word quality, insert a comma, and the phrase defects in the construction or due to any violation of the terms of the contracts. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we now move to pages 48 to 49, section 90. This is the organization function of the GPPB from Senators Marcos, Pimentel, and Ontiveros. Page 48, line 15, between the period and the article the, to insert the following paragraphs. The Government Procurement Policy Board, GPPB, shall be the central body that sets strategic directions and makes policy decisions regarding all matters affecting public procurement, having due regard to the country's regional and international obligations, and is tasked to lead the nation's efforts in advancing public procurement reforms in accordance with this act. The board shall A, formulate and amend whenever necessary the IRR of this act, associated issuances and government procurement manuals, Philippine bidding documents and standard forms for procurement, and issue policy papers to ensure that the procurement process is streamlined and responsive to the needs of the government. In line with its digitalization efforts, the GPPB shall establish an online automated process to provide timely responses to inquiries related to the implementation of this act. B, establish and implement the professionalization program provided in this act. And C, establish and implement a strategic procurement monitoring program that uses data analytics to enhance procurement planning and evidence-based policymaking as provided under the section on procurement data analytics. And on the same page, line 18, to delete the phrase head of agencies. And on line 19, same page, delete the words finance and trade and industry. And on line 20, before the word interior, insert national defense education. And after the word PSDBM, insert the word transportation. On line 22, after the period, insert the sentence, the GPPB may invite a representative from the Commission on Audit to serve as a resource person. Still on the same page, Mr. President, to delete lines 23 and 24. And on line 25, delete the first sentence and replace with, in the performance of its functions, the GPPB shall be supported by a technical support office, TSO, an attached agency to the DBM. On line 26, delete the phrase an executive director and replace it with a director general with a rank. And on the same line, delete the phrase the rank of. And on line 27 of the same page, delete the phrase executive directors and replace it with director generals with a rank. And on the same line until line 28, delete the phrase the rank of. On line 28, after the word secretary, insert the phrase to be appointed by the president as endorsed by the secretary of the DBM, all of whom should be. On line 29 to 30, after the word integrity, delete the phrase to be appointed by the president of the Republic of the Philippines as recommended by the chairperson of the GPPB and replace it with the secretary of the DBM shall appoint the officials and employees of the TSO for ranks lower than the deputy director general. And same page, lines 30 to 32, delete the sentence, the GPPB shall determine the organizational structure and staffing pattern of the TSO subject to the evaluation and approval of the DBM. On page 49, line 9, delete the phrase sectoral groups such as, and on line 12, delete others and replace with other sectoral groups. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 49, pages 49 and 50 on section 91 from Senator Pimentel and Senator Risa, pages 49 to 51, to delete the entire section 91 and replace it with, I'll hold it. Is it an anterior amendment?
Yes,
Mr. President?
Mr. President. If I
Senator
may-
Marcos is recognized. The lady may proceed.
Yes, if I may, in section 90, with regard to the organization and the functions, we needed a clarification. I think we submitted this amendment with regard to the reorganization of the GPPB and the TSO. It's merely a query that
Yes.
perhaps could be included in the amendment. What happens to the existing staff? Could we add the provision safeguard, the provision which is a safeguard that no layoffs of existing personnel subject to style or something to that effect?
We accept,
What
Mr.
does
President.
the sponsor say?
We accept, Mr. President. Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's all. It's to ensure the continuity, maintain the institutional knowledge, and uphold stability during the transition. We all know the expertise and the efficiency of the personnel of both the GPPB and the TSO, and we would like to uphold their seniority and skills. Thank you very much.
We
Given
thank
the acceptance of the distinguished sponsor, the entire amendment of the distinguished lady, Senator Marcos, is hereby approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Marcos. Again, if we can move back to pages, what I mentioned earlier, Mr. President, pages 49 to 51 from Senator Coco, Senator Antiveros, and this representation, to delete the entire section 91 and replace it with a new section to read as follows. Section 91, prohibited acts. The following acts committed by public officers are prohibited: opening any sealed bid, including but not limited to bids that may have been submitted through the electronic system, and any and all documents required to be sealed or divulging their contents to any prospective bidder, person, or any party having direct or indirect interest in the project to be procured prior to the appointed time for the public opening of bids or other documents. B, delaying without justifiable cause the screening for eligibility, opening of bids, evaluation, and post-evaluation of bids, and awarding of contracts beyond the prescribed periods of action provided for in the IRR. C, unduly influencing or exerting undue pressure on any member of the BAC or any officer or employee of the procuring entity to take a particular bidder, or allowing oneself to be unduly influenced or pressured. D, splitting of contracts which exceed procedural purchase limits and competitive bidding. E, abusing the exercise of the power of the hope or his or her duly authorized representative to reject any and all bids with manifest preference to any bidder. F, simulation of procurement eligibility requirements or strategic procurement planning activities. G, all other acts or omissions with the intention of not complying with the mandatory provisions of this act. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 51, after line 21, to insert a new section to read as follows. Section blank with a number, administrative liability of public officers without prejudice to the criminal and civil liabilities under Republic Act 3019, otherwise known as the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, and other penal laws. Any person found to have committed any of the acts in the preceding section shall be liable administratively with all the accessory penalties for government employees, even if no criminal prosecution is instituted against him. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Mr. President, on page 51, after line 24, to insert a new paragraph which reads, notwithstanding Article 22 of the Revised Penal Code or any law to the contrary, the administrative, civil, and or criminal liability of any person, corporation, or any other entity for any unlawful act committed prior to the effectivity of this act shall not be diminished, modified, nor affected in any way by its enactment. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 51, line 25, to delete the word hope and replace it with the phrase head of agency. And on the same page, line 26, between the words back and if, insert the phrase and other officials and employees involved. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 52, section 94, line 3, to delete the words as well as removal of administrative investigation. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 52, before line 18, insert a new section which shall read as follows. Section, administrative liability of private entities without prejudice to criminal and civil liabilities under this act and applicable laws, including their accessory penalties. If any, administrative liability attaches to private entities such as suppliers, contractors, or consultants that are subjected to any of the following penalties. Any appropriate corrective measure, depending on the severity of the offense, considering its disadvantages to the GOP, shall be imposed in accordance with the guidelines of the GPPB. B, suspension shall be imposed for offenses committed under section XX of this act. Thus, the entity is prohibited from participating in any procurement of the procuring entity concerned for a given period. Or C, blacklisting shall be imposed in case offenses occur. Other sections, just place the appropriate number, Your Honor. Consequently, the entity shall be disqualified from participating in all government procurements for a given period or perpetually, as the case may be. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On pages 52 to 53, to delete the entire section 97 and replace it with a new section as follows. Section with the number, imposition of suspension. The Hope, subject to the authority delegated to the BAC, if any, shall impose the penalty of suspension for 1 year for the first offense and suspension of 2 years for the second offense for any of the following offenses. A, refusing or failing to post the required performance security within the prescribed time. B, withdrawing a bid or refusing to accept an award, or refusing or failing to enter into a contract with the procuring entity without justifiable cause. After the approval of the Hope for having been the declared LCRB, MEARB, or HRRB, as the case may be. C, refusing to clarify or validate in writing its bid during post-qualification within a period of 7 calendar days from receipt of the request for clarification. D, causing the delay without justifiable cause of the screening for eligibility, opening of bids, evaluation, and post-evaluation of bids, and awarding of contracts. E, for the renewal of contracts for regular and recurring services, refusal of the service provider to accept the notice of renewal or failure to submit its updated documentary requirements for the renewal of contract without any justifiable reason. F, delivering of goods of unsatisfactory or inferior quality as may be provided in the contract. G, rendering poor performance by the consultant of one's service. Poor performance shall be as follows. I, defective design resulting in substantial corrective works in design and or construction. Double I, failure to deliver critical outputs due to fault or negligence of the consultant. Triple I, specifying materials which are inappropriate, substandard, or way above acceptable standards. And fourth, allowing defective workmanship or works by the winning bidder being supervised by the consultant. Or H, rendering poor performance by the winning bidder or unsatisfactory quality and or progress of work. Poor performance shall be as follows. Negative slippage of 15% and above within the critical path of the project due entirely to the fault or negligence of the winning bidder. And 2, quality of materials and workmanship not complying with the approved specifications arising from the fault or negligence of the winning bidder. Moreover, the bid security or the performance security posted by the entity concerned shall also be forfeited. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Page 53 to 55, section 98, to delete the entire section 98 and replace it with a new section as follows. Section with the appropriate number, imposition of blacklisting. The Hope may impose the penalty of blacklisting of 1 year prohibition for the first offense or 2 year prohibition for the second offense for any of the following offenses. A, committing 3 or more of any of the acts imposed with suspension as provided under the preceding section. B, using force, fraudulent machinations, coercion, undue influence, or pressure on any member of the BAC or any officer or employee of the procuring entity to take a particular action for its own favor or gain or to the disadvantage of a particular bidder. C, agreeing with 2 or more bidders and submitting different bids as if they were bona fide when they knew that one or more of them was so much higher than the other that it could not be honestly accepted and that the contract will surely be awarded to the prearranged lowest bid. D, using the name of another for purposes of participating in any procurement activity. E, submitting eligibility requirements and bids containing false information or falsified documents or the concealment of such information will materially alter the outcome of eligibility screening or any stage of the procurement. F, maliciously submitting different bids through 2 or more persons, corporations, partnerships, or any other business entity in which it has interest to create the appearance of a competition that does not in fact exist as to be declared as the winning bidder. G, submission of beneficial ownership information containing false entries. H, unauthorized accessing of the contents of any bid submitted to the procuring entity before the opening of bids. I, entering into an agreement with other bidders which call upon one to refrain from bidding for procurement contracts or which call for withdrawal of bids already submitted or which are otherwise intended to secure an undue advantage to any of the bidders. J, failing to faithfully disclose its relationship, regardless of the time of its discovery, with the Hope, members of the BAC, the TWG, and the BAC Secretariat, the head of the Procurement Management Office PMO or the end user unit or implementing unit, and the project consultants of the procuring entity or of the procurement agent, whichever is applicable by consanguinity or affinity, up to the third civil degree pursuant to the section on disclosure of relations. K, terminating the contract due to the default or unlawful acts of the bidder, supplier, contractor, or consultant. L, engaging in any documented unsolicited attempt to unduly influence the outcome of the bidding. M, employing schemes which stifle or suppress any procurement activity. N, assigning or subcontracting of the contract or any part thereof or substitution of key personnel named in the proposal without prior written approval by the procuring entity. O, willful or deliberate abandonment or non-performance of the project or contract by the winning bidder, resulting to substantial breach thereof without lawful and or just cause. Or P, in case it is determined prima facie that the winning bidder has engaged before or during implementation of the contract in the following unlawful deeds and behaviors relative to contract acquisition and implementation. 1, corrupt, fraudulent, collusive, and coercive practices. 2, drawing up or using forged documents. Or 3, using adulterated materials, means, or methods, or engaging in production contrary to rules of science or the trade. Moreover, the bid security or the performance security posted by the entity concerned shall be forfeited. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 55, after line 5, to insert the following new sections, which shall read as follows. Section with the number, proper number, imposition of blacklisting with perpetual disqualification. The Hope shall impose blacklisting with perpetual disqualification based on any of the following grounds. A, committing a third offense imposed with blacklisting under this act by the same procuring entity, or a combination of 3 violations imposed with blacklisting by the PE and other PEs as posted on the GPPB portal. Or B, failing to comply with the provision on warranty that requires to repair any noted defect or damage to the infrastructure project due to the use of materials of inferior quality within 90 days from the issuance of the order by the Hope to undertake such repairs. Moreover, the bid security or the performance security posted by the entity concerned shall be forfeited. Next section with the appropriate number, Mr. President, suspension pending blacklisting proceedings. During the pendency of the blacklisting proceedings, the bidder shall be automatically suspended from participating in the current procurement activity being undertaken by the procuring entity concerned, and the suspension order shall be immediately lifted in case the Hope dismissed the case. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 55, line 6, between the words of and blacklisted to insert the phrase suspended or, and on the same page, line 11, after the word bidder to insert a new sentence as follows. It is the responsibility of the procuring entity to upload to the portal of the GPPB the suspension order or blacklisting order, as the case may be, within 7 calendar days after its respective issuance. On the same page, line 12, between the words A and blacklisting, insert the phrase suspension or. On the same page, line 13, between the words the and blacklisting, insert the phrase suspension or. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 55, line 16, to delete the word proceedings and replace it with the phrase administrative proceedings for corrective measures, suspension or blacklisting at any stage of the procurement or contract implementation. And on the same page, line 17 to 18, delete the phrase in sections 97 and 98 and replace with the phrase in the sections on suspension and blacklisting. On the same page, line 18, after the word may, insert the word also. And still on the same page, line 18, delete the word or and replace it with and. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 55, line 24, delete the word against. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 55, line 31, delete the word court. On the same section, page 56, lines 2 to 3, delete the phrase section 103 hereof and replace it with the phrase the preceding section. And on the same page, line 31, between that and civil, delete the article A and replace it with an administrative. And still on the same section, page 56, lines 2 to 3, delete the phrase section 103 hereof and replace it with the phrase the preceding section. I so move, Mr. President.
Any object?
Lapit na. Lapit na.
Any objection?
No.
Same is approved.
Three more provisions. Just 3 more provisions, Mr. President, 3 or 4 more. Page 56, line 8, between the words any and civil, insert the phrase administrative. And on the same page, line 11, between the words or and misconduct, insert the word grave. And on the same page, line 15, between the words or and misconduct, also insert the word grave. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 56, line 28, between the words after the word processes and in to insert the phrase such as education, training, seminars, and workshops. And on page 56, line 29, after the word processes, insert the phrase supply chain management and logistics, including warehousing. And on the same page, line 29, insert a new paragraph which shall read as follows. The Hope members of the BAC and TWG shall undergo an executive course on procurement, while the BAC secretariat shall undergo annual training programs. And on page 56, line 31, after the word departments, insert the word bureaus. On page 57, line 2, delete the phrase of procuring entities. And on page 57, line 2, after the word training, insert the following sentence. The capacity building program shall include the development of skills of government agencies in understanding and implementing the government's green public procurement strategy through the following: A, conduct of relevant training needs assessment of the public sector; B, provision of technical assistance to suppliers, particularly the micro enterprises; and C, conduct of public awareness campaigns on green procurement, among others, Mr. President. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
It looks like that is the last amendment, Mr. President, but if I could ask the authority of the body that we authorize the Senate Secretary to make editorial or stylistic changes to the clean copy of this bill, including the renumbering, reordering of sections and subsections, as well as capitalization, abbreviation, and grammatical revisions. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the same is approved.
Which one? This one? May humabol po, Mr. President, on on page 17, line 31, section 31.
Anterior amendment.
Anterior amendment, Mr. President.
The
yes.
gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is on page 17 rather, line 14 on section 31 on repeat order from Senator Coco Pimentel. The paragraph after the word awarded, to insert the phrase through bidding. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, same is approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for being very patient, and to our colleagues also for, we appreciate the patience of the body.
Thank you
Mr.
for your steadfastness as well, Senator Angara, for finishing that 45-page individual amendments to this bill.
Thank you very much,
Majority
Mr.
Leader.
President. Thank you.
With no other individual amendments, Mr. President, I move to close the period of amendments.
There being no objection, the period for individual amendments to Senate Bill number 2593 is hereby terminated and closed.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2593. I so move, Mr. President.
Prior to the approval of the bill on second reading, Chair would like to state that this measure was shepherded under the leadership of Senate President Zubiri and clearly under the baton of Chairman Sani Angara of the Committee on Finance. So if the good Senate President will allow me to invite him to the rostrum to preside over the second and third reading approval of this measure. And given that he's nodding, then I will invite him. So we will suspend the session in the meantime. Session suspended.
Mr. President. Mr. President,
First of all, before we act on the motion on second reading, I would like to thank our Senate President, Senate President Chis Escudero, for the magnanimity of allowing me to preside on this very important measure. It means a lot to us because, first of all, we started defending this measure several months ago, and I had committed to the President. That we will prioritize this and deliver this this week. So thank you, sir, for allowing me to make this final act of approving this measure, which means a lot to us. So, Majority Leader,
Mr. President, I reiterate my previous motion that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 2593. I so move, Mr. President.
there being no objection to the motion of Majority Floor Leader, Senate Bill number 2593 is approved on second reading. I believe, Majority Leader, it's a certified measure.
A minute suspension, Mr. President.
Yes, session suspended.
Mr. President, this being a certified measure, I would like to request the Secretary to read the letter of certification from President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr.
Yes, we ask the Secretary to proceed with the reading of the certification.
Malacanang Palace, Manila, 19 March 2024, Senator Juan Miguel F. Zubiri, Senate President, the Philippine Senate, Pasay City. Mr. Senate President, pursuant to the provisions of Article 6, Section 26, Paragraph 2 of the 1987 Constitution, I hereby certify to the necessity of the immediate enactment of Senate Bill number 2593, an act revising Republic Act number 9184, otherwise known as the Government Procurement Reform Act, and for other purposes. The need to facilitate the passage of this important piece of legislation is imperative in order to address the tedious and prolonged procedure in the public procurement and the need for procurement efficacy. The bill will also remedy the public emergency caused by the gaps in public spending, which hamper the ability of the government to deliver substantial services to the people. Best regards, very truly yours, the President of the Philippines.
With that, Majority Leader, may we proceed on the third reading vote?
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the body, I move to consider on third reading Senate Bill 2593. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure, proceed with the roll call vote.
An act revising Republic Act number 9184, otherwise known as the Government Procurement Reform Act, and for other purposes. Roll call vote. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla,
Yes.
Senator Tolentino,
Yes.
Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva,
Mr. President,
Senator
resounding yes.
Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, Senator Zubiri,
Yes na yes.
the Senate President.
Yes. With 23 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, 0 abstentions, Senate Bill number 2593 is approved on third reading. Congratulations to the sponsor, Senator Angara, and to all the authors.
Thank you,
and the
Mr.
whole
President.
Senate.
Majority Leader, Mr. President, may I just insert my explanation of vote and thank our colleagues and all the resource persons because there were so many people worked on this bill, but I want to mention them, but all my saliva has dried up and I'd like to just insert it into the record, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. We take
Sorry,
note
sir.
of the manifestation of the good sponsor. And I believe you want to proceed with the ratification of the bill that I authored on the Sharia court.
Yes, Mr. President.
With the
but-
permission again of the Senate President.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. President. But before we proceed to the other administrative matters, the Honorable Senator Grace Poe would like to have her guests acknowledged today in the gallery. Students from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, as well as Mr. Chris Tan. Mr. President, we are in receipt of a bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions votes of House Bill number 7398. This is the bill on the Southern Luzon State University Catanawan Campus, College of Veterinary Medicine, Catanawan, Quezon. With the permission of the body, may we recognize the chairperson of the Senate panel, the Senate President Francis Escudero, to give us the highlights of the conference committee report.
Yes, our former chairman of the Committee on Higher Education, now Senate President Escudero is recognized.
May I ask the explanation, to abbreviate the proceedings, Mr. President, may I ask that the explanation be inserted into the records for brevity of the proceedings? I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion of the Senate President, yes, the gentleman from Cagayan de Oro, our minority leader, is recognized.
Let's not start that practice, Mr. President. Let us have reports on the BICAM committee proceedings, Mr. President. Kasi hindi naman kami lahat makasunod doon, Mr. President.
Yes, I see an affirmative reaction from the sponsor. We recognize our distinguished Senate President Escudero is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of the majority leader, and as commanded by our minority floor leader, may I place on the record the conference committee, the joint explanatory statement on the disagreeing provisions of House Bill number 7398. Number one, the conferees agreed to adopt House Bill number 7398 as amended by the Senate as the working draft of the bicameral meeting. Number two, Section 1 of HBN 7398 as amended by the Senate was adopted by both houses, and Section 1 of the reconciled bill, but to change all references to Katanawan to Chaong. Number three, Section 2 of House Bill number 7398 as amended by the Senate was adopted by both houses as Section 2 of the reconciled bill, but to change reference to Katanawan from Katanawan to Chaong. Basically, Mr. President, Your Honor, we are simply changing the location of the veterinary medicine campus from Katanawan to Chaong. Ang laman po ng lahat ng bill pareho na maliban dun sa lugar. Dahil matapos mag-hearing, nagdesisyon yung mga lokal doon, partikular ang mga opisyal doon na mas bagay at kailangan sa Chaong. Lahat po ng ibang parte ng bill pareho na. I hope that satisfies our minority leader.
Yes, our minority floor leader is recognized.
Mr. President, so sa pagkakaintindi ko, bale, nang nangyari sa BICAM, lumipat ang location ng veterinary school. So isn't this the essence precisely of the bill, Mr. President? We are establishing a veterinary school in location X. Dito natin diniscuss sa pinasa natin, location X. Ang report ngayon ng BICAM Conference Committee, it's in location Y. So doesn't that change everything, Mr. President?
Mr. President, Your Honor, as the good gentleman very well knows, sometimes anything and everything happens in the BICAM, especially with the budget bill. But Mr. President, it is the position of this representation that the subject matter of the bill is the establishment of a veterinary school. In this case, in a particular town in the province of Quezon. We are not changing, we can say that it's a veterinary school in the province of Quezon. I would tend to agree with the good gentleman if we would establish the veterinary school all of a sudden in Cebu from a town in Quezon. But this is merely moving it from one town to another instead of, Mr. President, still retaining it there and perhaps creating more problems after belated input from the locals there.
This is a physical school, Mr. President. Yeah, physical.
Hindi pa po
So,
ginagawa. Gagawin
Yes,
pa
I
lang.
know, but it's to be physically located in a certain place. So location X deals with a different LGU. Location Y, although in the same legislative district, involves another LGU. So yung mga basic tanong natin sa committee level or dito sa plenary, what was the position of the LGU? What was the position of any other official? Baka magbago, Mr. President. So this is not the same thing. This is not a defense of the Senate version, Mr. President. Buti sana kung paiba may konting yung administrative doon, yung sino official doon, but nagbago po ng location eh. We do not even know what is the position of the LGU in the new location. Impossible. Whenever natin natanong, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Your Honor, this is a local bill. My assumption is the member of Congress and the localities of the House and the local government units there would be in a better position than we are. And let me reiterate, Mr. President, with our due request to and begging the indulgence of the good minority leader, that it is the same province, and I would agree with him, as I said. If we were transferring it to a totally different province altogether or a totally different region altogether. I do not know how far Catanawan is from Quezon, but it is in the same province, Mr. President. And my interpretation, as I said, of this bill, given that I'm the principal sponsor, is that the main subject of the bill is the establishment of a veterinary school, and secondarily in the province of Quezon, and if at all, on a third note, within the municipality of Quezon, and now in the municipality of Catanawan, and now Chao. May I request for a 1 minute suspension, Mr.
Yes,
President?
session
Yes,
suspended
because-
for 1 minute.
Before we proceed, Mr. President, for the deferral of the ratification of the Bicameral Conference Committee report, may we recognize Senator Grace Poe, who would like to make an interjection relative
Yes,
to the
sir.
matter at hand.
Our distinguished colleague from Iloilo, Pangasinan, and San Juan, Senator Grace Poe.
Yeah, to my former favorite and consensus builder, Senate President. It's very sentimental to see you there. Actually,
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm very grateful. Anyway,
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. President, when Senate President Soto was our Senate President at the time, I remember Del Monte Avenue was going to be renamed FPJ Avenue. But because of some issues, we agreed here, and then it was adopted in the House to change it and move it to Roosevelt Avenue, which is a totally different area. Now I know the scale is different because it's just renaming a street. On the other hand, if you want to think about the local government also, iba naman barangay din yon. Number one. Number two, iba rin ang layout at ang karsada at kung ilang street signs ang ilalagay. So, in short, it's the principle behind making certain adjustments, but the intention is there, which is actually renaming. That's just my 2 cents, and I know it's not a perfect analogy or example, but it's sort of related.
If we can get additional facts, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Was this change made after BICAM or during BICAM?
During
the lawmaking process, di ba? It was during the processing of the bill na change siya, not in the BICAM. I just want to ask that fact.
Now that I remember. But I think this is even a step higher because, right. We still had to, okay. Then I rest my case, but I just wanted to give this example. So it should be more expedient at this point, maybe, if it was agreed na in the House and then.
We take note of the manifestation of our distinguished colleague. Yes, Majority Leader. So we are going to suspend the consideration, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. President, I move for the deferral of the
motion.
consideration of bicameral committee report concerning House Bill 7398. I so move, Mr. President.
Yes, there being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, we are likewise in receipt of a bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2594 and House Bill 8257. This is the bill on the creation of additional Sharia judicial districts and the Sharia circuit courts. And with the permission of the body, may I be recognized to give us the highlights of the conference committee report, Mr. President.
Yes, the sponsor was the former chairman, or is still the chairman of the Committee on Justice, and our majority floor leader is recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do know that you really pushed hard for the ratification, for the approval of this creation of Sharia district courts and circuit courts. The Senate version was adopted as a working draft. The bill amends Presidential Decree 1083, known as the Code of Muslim Personal Laws of the Philippines, and Batas Pambansa Bilang 129, otherwise known as the Judiciary Reorganization Act of 1980. The bicameral conference committee meeting was attended by the House panel, Chairperson Juliet Ferrer, Congressman Loreto Acharon of General Santos City, Congresswoman Jervil Luistro and of Batangas, and Representative Amina Dimaporo of Lanao del Norte. Also present were Senator Robin Hood Padilla and Justice Raul Villanueva from the Office of the Court Administrator of the Supreme Court. Some of the highlights, Mr. President, both chambers successfully reconciled the three conflicting provisions of the proposed bill. This is a landmark measure, Mr. President, aimed at establishing 3 new Sharia judicial district courts and 12 new Sharia circuit courts across the Philippines. The Supreme Court will fix the territorial jurisdiction of each Sharia circuit court based on geographical contiguity and accessibility, as well as the Muslim population of the areas concerned. A new section specifies the staffing pattern for each Sharia district court consisting of 12 personnel, judge, clerk, legal researcher, interpreter, etc., etc. Similarly, the staffing pattern for each new Sharia circuit court is specified, consisting of 9 personnel, a judge, clerk of court, interpreters, stenographers, etc. The full contents of what transpired during the bicameral conference committee will be inserted into the joint explanation of votes, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we approve and ratify the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2492 and House Bill 7819, and let the text of the joint explanation be deemed read into the records of the chamber. I so move, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you. Before I act on the motion, I want to thank the sponsor for tackling this in the committee level, passing this swiftly on the floor as principal author of the measure. And again, I'm honored to preside on approval of this measure, and I thank the Senate President Escudero, for allowing me to preside on this very important measure, which is close to my heart, to add additional Sharia courts all throughout the Philippines para hindi na po sila kailangan pumunta pa sa Cotabato City at sa BARM para mapakinggan ang kanilang mga issues with the Sharia courts. Mabuhay po kayo, Senator Tolentino. Once again, there being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, Chair hearing none, motion is approved. It's ratified and duly ratified.
Thank you, Mr. President. 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Before I recognize the Majority Floor Leader, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Senate President Zubiri, not only for approving on second and third reading the Government Procurement Act, but also the other bills on top of what he himself authored. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Senate President Zubiri. Majority Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 75th session, Monday, May 20, 2024, and consider the same as approved.
There is a motion. Hearing none, the Journal of the 75th Session, Monday, May 20, 2024, is hereby approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are in receipt of a letter from the Honorable Senator J.B. Ejercito addressed to the Office of the Senate President, and this would be incorporated into the records of these proceedings, Mr. President, expressing his intention to resign as chairman of the committees on local government, and the other committee is urban planning, housing, and resettlement. Because of this, Mr. President, the positions mentioned are now deemed vacant. For the record, Mr. President.
Given the points raised by, before acting on the motion, given the points raised by Senator Villanueva, it is the assumption of the chair that the respective vice chairpersons in order of seniority will in the meantime take over the aforestated committees, and the same goes with the other committees that have been vacated in order to address the concern, and as correctly pointed out by the gentleman from Bulacan.
And we are not objecting, Mr. President.
Thank you, Your Honor. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until tomorrow, Wednesday, May 22, 2024 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, session is hereby adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, May 22, 2024.